Hey guys, it's Casey, and as promised, welcome back to my channel, where today is day 2 of my 10 days of 2025, where I'm going to be sharing an observation that I've made over the past decade. Think of it sort of like my little reality check to you, where every day for the next, I guess it's 8 days now, I'm going to be sharing an observation that I've made, starting with the most basic and very slowly working up to the more obscure observations. The observations that an outsider would look at and wonder how the hell we have survived as a species this far. Now, if there is one consistency through time and space, it is that humanity loves to believe that we are at the top of our game at any given point in time. And this is, of course, me speaking about culturally more than on an individual level, but I guess it could also apply on an individual level too, depending on the person, obviously. But culturally speaking, every single empire in human history has believed itself to be the most culturally enriched, the most enlightened, the most advanced, the most correct about, well, practically everything culture that humanity has ever spawned. And yet, when you've been around the block once or twice, you do start to notice the cracks in the facade. So do believe me when I tell you that this specific culture, this 2024 era of humanity is very, very unique. So for the second day of 2025, we're going to be discussing a big one, or some people might even say the biggest one, and that is history, or rather how little you all seem to actually know about it. Because if there's one thing that I've learned over being here for the last decade, is that as a whole, you all seem to have a really strange relationship with the past. And I know that history is a word that gets thrown around a lot, usually as a weapon in an argument or as a justification for holding a really unsavory opinion. But let me just tell you, after being marooned here for the last decade, I can confidently say that as a whole, none of you have really any idea about the truth of your own past. And before anybody even gets started, I am not talking about that whole history is written by the Victor cliche or anything like that, because the problem in question that I'm talking about runs a lot deeper than just some colonists trying their hand at creative writing. Even discarding the colonists, the whole story has been mangled to such a degree that it is completely unrecognizable from the truth. It's almost as if, as a society, you've all been playing a really bad game of telephone for the last century or so. So by the time it gets to you, because again, this is not a problem with any one specific individual, I don't think. I mean, if you were part of the Spanish Inquisition or you helped burn down the Library of Alexandria, then yeah, you probably do need to take some level of personal responsibility for all this. But for the most part, by the time you as an individual get to history class, what was once a very rich and narrative-driven account of a truthful event has instead turned into a very simplistic and feel good or feel bad, depending on the context, fictional story designed to make your ancestors look like flawless heroes or irredeemable villains, again, depending on the context in question. And obviously, the further back into the calendar we go, the worse the problem becomes. But even your most recent histories are so tangled with half-truths and selective memories and deliberate misrepresentations that, and I'm talking about the histories of your own lifetimes here, things that have happened in the last 10 years that I've been here, let alone what happened in your parents' lifetimes or your grandparents' lifetimes or beyond that. In the 10 years that I have been here, I've met maybe 4 people who have enough of a knowledge base about history to be talking about anything that happened further back than the 90s. And even then, I think about 70% of you shouldn't even be talking about things that happened any further back than 2020. For example, how many people watching this today know that the divorce rate in 1925 was higher than the divorce rate is today? I'm guessing not a lot of you. And that is because history today is not taught objectively. You're not taught the objective facts about what happened. In 2025 specifically, and well, who knows, we're 2 days into 2025, but at least in 2024, you are encouraged to look at history through a political lens. And I'm not talking about the politics of the time period that you're examining. I'm talking about the politics of today. So if you believe in a more left-wing ideology, you're going to look back on the 1920s and you're just going to see things that reinforce your views today. Because again, human history does not change. So you're going to look back on the 1920s and you're going to think it's this absolute horrible hellscape of sexism and racism and domestic violence. And you're not going to be wrong about that. And then on the flip side, if you follow a more right-wing ideology, you're going to look back at the 1920s and you're going to see this wholesome idealistic community that is pretty much a paradise. And again, you would not be wrong. But the reason that neither of these two opinions are wrong is because they are both two sides of the same coin. And the truth of the matter is in the middle. But what happens when you look at it from a political viewpoint of your own time is that you're going to cherry pick what you want to take away from it rather than see the middle road. And while we're here, can somebody tell me who started this narrative that medieval women got married fresh out of the womb, proceeded to pop out 12 children by the age of 12, and then proceeded to drop dead of old age on the eve of their 21st birthday? Because that is not what happened. That is not reality. That is not history. That is not truth. I mean, for crying out loud, Anne Boleyn was 31 years old when she married Henry VIII. Farmers were most certainly not marrying off their perfectly able-bodied daughters with a pair of perfectly good helping hands the day that she sprouted her first pube, because that would have been insane, and it's equally insane that so many of you seem to believe that that is a gospel of truth and something that happened. Like I said earlier, it's not just distant past that's being sanitized and distorted, it's your most recent past too. Events from the last 20 years, even less than 20 years, are very quickly being reshaped into narratives that fit someone's agenda and don't reflect the truth of the matter. And I have no doubt that every single one of you have seen this for yourself, scrolling through TikTok and you get to a person proclaiming facts that you know are just wrong, because they're not speaking about history. It's just propaganda with sleek interface and catchy music attached to it. And the most frustrating part about any of this is that history in it of itself is so much more entertaining and interesting than any of these stories that have been concocted in its place to hide the truth. Like, history is so colorful and it's so messy and it's so full of so many contradictions. But embracing that complexity, it requires a lot of effort. It requires asking questions and digging deep and making peace with the fact that you might never get the answers that you're searching for. But unfortunately, there is a huge part of the population out there who would prefer to cling to these myths like safety blankets, because their narrative, the one that they've concocted, is a lot easier to digest than the truth. But here's the thing. If you don't know where you've come from, you can't expect to know where you're going. And a lot of you don't, and I think that's why I find you all so annoying to talk to. Because you can't get anything positive out of a conversation with people who don't know themselves. And if they don't know their own histories, then how can you possibly hope to know yourself, you know?